야, 시험이 뭐.
Prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus did I hear one time. The Bhagwan was dwelling in the Mass Vulture mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagwan was absorbed in concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, with the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, factor, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unseized, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition, factor, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no element of eye element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom. The mind, without obscuration and without fear, having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwelled in the three times also manifest the complete awakening to unsurpassable complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not from the mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared that Yatagata Paragata Parasamgata Bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagwan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagwan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadoti-putra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding India entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, Asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagwan.
Masam Jimmy Jiro, Barajin, Majim, Manangoni, Soso, Rajimo, the Sunja, Yumba Cha, Salo. Teada, Gade, Para, some Gaden Buddhi so. Teada, Gade, Para, some Gaden Buddhi so. Teada, Gade, Para, some Gaden Buddhi so. Niente si ho sono così ni si tense kan da la pemba jana la jin si den no za wa anda ya da den be to no na bo kun de na so ni so ba niente jan jo san be so je san je jin ni yum dan la cha chen lo kan ge den jen de wa zhong ga wa me ba jian me ba cha ba me ba dang me ba wa me ba zhong me ba ta de de me de je me zhe ba ni si den ba so be san je ma nam je tam ba
de ma karika of Nagarjuna, a prostitute, the best of teacher who taught that whatever is dependent, their arisen is unceasing, unborn, not annihilated, impermanent, not coming, not going, without identity, free from conceptual construction.
Oh. That's actually. And the Raji, Mishusabshibadi.
So we'll go through Master Nagarjuna's text, continue with the chapter 24.
Moni ki trubar tawe and that Tundamawa. Dono Luju with Jendang Umabenari in Aya, Tanya do Rangzen Ghana. And 그게 tension 누베 땡중이야 누기 손데 봐 단위도 자화책에 펜은지게 이게 뭐지 여보래 다 진짜게 다 어디 라소나 아니 어떻게 야. 진짜기니 어디 쇼지마가 차나? 엔다. 왜 차탈을 도대기도 없으니. 다 견주들이 좋은 말이야.
So what we have covered so far is the objection from the Buddhist philosophical thoughts who say that if things do not have any kind of essence in them, essential nature in themselves, then what we cannot posit things to have any functions, such as causes giving rise to effects and things creating other things and so forth. And so this is what they object to. This includes even some of the followers of Master Nagarjuna himself. So they say that if things do not have any essence or self-nature, then we cannot establish these functioning objects, functioning things.
당 고불로 주기 대판에 컨디션 버렸으나 대라 샤바 최진이 동리 거다 동리당 동리 되는 마도에 지지되는 내려이었어. 자랑기 에네 네 에네 우마바 최선제 모니기 주베 동 전에 다 모니 매바 전에 시신기 흉나로 송셔버디 다 지신버다 캘는 거야래. 와 배나 속 동보니 속소 신 송셔버디 다 지신버 캘나. 다가는 신기 데도 건식다. 다가는 신기 니친날에 용유 속 동보니 이 동을 미시데 속 니 동보니 다 다가는 신 남달 권지 거리야 남달 고성도 자니 동번이 동 미시디 동번이 당스 다가는 신기 그다 참아 교다 다가는 신 지금 멤버 제부체니 대양 교든 제부 최 티니 에 동번이 동 미시디 교든 제부 니 동번이 당스니 돌레티 송야래 자장가 어다 루주기 시신긴 되나 송셔버디 다 시신버다 캐랑 저거 저기야래 된대기 가서 시신기 중나라 이 최터제 원이 주변 동래선에 송고야기 내가도 가 토버스라나 다 동리지 가봤어야 돼 동리지 가봤어야 돼 동반이 있어야 돼 지리니 최남기 인루진 버려 대안에 시신기 중나라 디시샤번은 중요로 뭐 중요로 최남기 춘이니 내가 코나오 세네 춘이 동반이 있어야 돼 가서 그게 배 참에 미고 예배 최 그리지면 이나야 코랑기 유루코 단 내루 차대하래 봐 디스 그래서 근데 인도산에 안다디 이니 땅 안주 진짜 다 근데 인도 땅 안주 셈디에 러시 동아래 대화도 동에서 해야 돼 러시 동아래 방제 집어대 러시 동아래 본진년부터 해야 러시 동아래 그래서 되고 임으로다 배는 뒤지기 쉬 미다고 입었어야 돼. 그 런신이 미다고 차대기 알아. 자다 대신도 최터저 런신이 동 차대기 알아. 다 런신 코라 런신이 동부 임버 되기 맞아야 패닉하게 믿어가. 다 안다 동반이 있으니 지부게 시국을 있으니 송고야기 다 동리 관배 과바디 다 가려서나 나란저 로라 가서 쉬는 시리 뭐부 강다 강이나야 지금 파르면에 여대버지 그 담바 여대버지 그 담바와로 치다 코라버게 최대다데 코랑기 인우스 주었다 보지 나도 로라 셔크도 사다데베 담바레 사지 자 진짜 이동하지나야 다 담배 이동 이동하지네 담배 이동 애니 추스데 이동하면 나선 나티 담바와 된대시다 로리야 샤 로리 샤는 시 달라야 르 탐진을 제인도잖아 아니 친주로고 로 취미이지기 다 로디디 제용의 지쳐도 자 된대 이 취미이지 로디니 아니 차단 거 로디 대왕게 아니 룡아 이순게 랭앤사니 아니 저부동에야 연구해봐 인도산에 단 저부동에 면도버지 임바이나 저부동에 컨저스니 연구해봐 다로 추배왕의 연구해봐. 로 치질로 로이왕의 연구해봐. 미시배왕의 연구해봐. 디디 시에버지. 다 디디 가서 그래. 지금 뭐주세니. 다 된저기 동네에 싸워 제겐기 다 치질로 로 컨디션에서나 유난 치 나와이네리 난기 녀와이네리 강다 강이나야 된징면에 숙투버 된징면에 줍댕에 숙투버 담바와지 로로 나온대야 대 지들 나왔는 시인 바 셴베 바다 가서 그래 아태는 즈버게 등에 디 견하게 여 인도산에 다 뒷매버서 고요래 뒷매버서야 되라 디 최신 대다 될 민네 대단대 땡주도가 다 당연지기 담바와로 당연 걸로지 임베 인도산에 다 가서 그래 그게 최신 대단 대 나란솔로 나왔는 시 담바를 매대버지 셰베이나 아니 치 나와도 난게 녀와 지 나와도 녀와디 레인도잖아 속도가 로를 셔거제디 샤하는 시매 삼배 로치 레베이나 속도버 따외 로티 시르샤베 토르 차단 계약 로티리 아니 슉충르냐 고도다네 갈래갈래 슉슉 충도돼야지 아니 림베림베 다 뻥돼야지 신다 도스두야 진짜 이번 인도에서는 동번이 사디 예버레디 이네 코시에 거야디 빼르 차샤나 미다고 힘을 봐 두식 처리 미다고 힘을 봐 기지기지 집에다 이거 미다고 힘을 봐 레디 미다고 힘을 시에 거야디 태어난 미다고 레디 르 딱바른 짐베 왕기 등진 왕기 애니 견망고 다 연결 봐 사진데 인도산에 등진 견서가 예바 인도산에 등진으로 도야가 된다라 미다고 힘버디 미다고로 못자니 미다고로 시에 인도산에 왔다 애니 즉 등진을 장배 견리도 하고 말아 죄송아 사진데 어다 디는 신체니 담바른 짐바 가 오니기 주베 담바른 짐베 왕게 라베 견디기 매바 쏴야디 담바 매바 타쳐버식 로끼네 로티 숙자야 말로 셴탑셴 가는 매바래 다른 남자자나리야 참소 몽던 개미칠 시도니바 살주 민센 참바 공바다 이제 닝지 공바사로 데저트에디기 덴진은 누구 말했어 가라슬람은 덴진다 진당 개와지면 누가스 자 덴진은 너겐디 미고 찍을 미네 진당 뭔게도 숙당이 그 로지기 내용을 마도 로테다 menjawa스지기 르 누구 말했어 로 상부 참바의 인지로 써봐 로 참바 가서 개별로 치는 로 상부리디 이네 디 네토 말했어 장소 몽던 개미칠 신도 녀바 세다 등진 송야래 신도 녀바 살주 민스 자와 남지 그들 송야기 최지담에다 금도 송야기 최지담이 캐바 열에디 이네 조상고 찍버려
So, to the objections of the lower schools of Buddhist philosophical thoughts, the Master Nagarjuna answers by saying that by saying this seventh verse number 7 of the 24th chapter. So, he's saying that you realists actually you object to us for asserting that things do not have any essential nature or self-existence, but this the lack of self-existence of things is actually in accord with the that of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So Master Nagarjuna and the Prasankhya Madhyamikas take the statements in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras as literal teachings. And so similarly there are such other statements in other sutras, such as the Ratnakuta Sutra, and also 25,000 verses of the Panchaparamita and other sutras as well, where, for example, in the Ratnakuta Sutra and the 25,000 verses of Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, it says, and it's said that this emptiness is not emptied by the form is not empty, not made empty by emptiness, but form itself is empty. And so similarly it is said in the sutras that emptiness is not emptied by emptiness itself, but emptiness itself is empty. And then also that things do not have any kind of characteristic and so forth, but the results are empty in themselves. And so these different sutras or statements in the sutras are taken as literal by Master Nagarjuna and his followers, Prasangikas. So Master Nagarjuna is responding to the other schools by saying that you who speak in these terms have failed to understand the purpose of emptiness. And so, what is the purpose of these teachings, which are taken literally by Master Nagarjuna, as showing that things do not have any nature, an intrinsic nature in and of themselves? Just as the Buddha has said in another sutra, that whether the Tathagatas, the Buddhas, appear or not in the world, the suchness or the reality of phenomena as it is abides. So the reality of mind, or the suchness of mind, is such that they do not have any self-nature or self-existence, intrinsic nature. It's also this case with the defilements that are to be overcome, and also the antidote which actually counteracts and overcomes these defilements. But then, although things are devoid of any self-nature, just by themselves, of course, they do not have any effect on us. So what we must do is try to learn about them, how things are empty of self-nature, and then practice them in meditation. And so the meditation, the purpose of meditation is to counteract the appearance of things as having some kind of self-nature, and just as they appear to have some kind of self-nature, we also cling on to such a self-nature in things. It's whether it's in relation to things that are attractive to us or unattractive to us, they appear to us as if they have some kind of self-nature, self-existence, and because of that existence, that appearance, then we cling on to such appearance, we cling on to such self-nature, and that in turn, that incorrect perception or gives rise to those of attachment, anger, and these in turn bring about those of this the result of suffering in us. So how do the sufferings arise or happen to us is because of the distorted views, the distorted way of looking at things. And since we are under the power of them, we are being introduced to how these distorted perceptions, distorted conceptions actually act on us, and they let us create, or those of the karmas and so forth, the other negative thoughts and so forth, and which in turn give us the sufferings. And although things do appear to us as if they have some kind of self-existence, and there's some kind of solid existence in themselves, that's not the way they exist. And so we have to try to understand how things do not exist the way they appear and the way we cling to them. And therefore, everything, any object that you take as the subject of your the emptiness, has to be understood as not having any kind of intrinsic nature, any kind of self-existence in themselves. And so once you understand that, and then when you develop some experience of things having no self-existence as such, although they do appear, later on what you will be able to do is that just as soon as something appears to you, you'll be able to say that, oh, that's how this appears to me, this thing appears to me as if it has some kind of self-existence, but that's not the way it actually exists. And so this applies both to the external world as well as the external world of the appearances of things, as well as the internal world of experiences. So nothing has any solid existence, any solid solidified sort of existence at all, and therefore you'll be able not to then you can, with that kind of understanding, with that kind of insight, you will not cling on to the things, although they appear to have some sort of self-existence. And then through training, this clinging and will reduce further and further. So it's this, for example, to give an analogy here, the things that are created, that are produced, are of course impermanent, but they do not appear as impermanent to us, and therefore we cling on to some kind of permanence in them. And because of that clinging onto permanence, all the kinds of faults and all kinds of shortcomings occur in us. And therefore what we need to be introduced to is that things are impermanent. And then once you understand that things are impermanent, then you will be able to do away with the faults or the disadvantages, the faults or the shortcomings that are brought about by this clinging to permanence. And similarly, it is in the case of these things appearing as if they have some true existence. Once you are able to decisively, conclusively say and think that things do not have any kind of true existence in and of themselves, and this clinging to a true existence will reduce. And then there's no other way than bringing up this understanding that things do not have any true existence in and of themselves to counter the clinging to true existence. And in Pramanavartika, for example, because in Pramanavartika it is said, because compassion or loving kindness and so forth do not go diametrically opposed that of the understanding of selflessness, that they cannot overcome that this clinging to selfhood.
nang de yor la na da to zhu yor is da su dong ba wo sa ge dong be den de tin de su 그게 랑문에 모니 주 때에 숙대 코랑 그 내로 주 yor bes 쟤네 다 단다 버 주 yor bes 라면 단다 버 주 yor 말이스 저 진짜 인도잖아요 안다 끔들 각자 đảm바 왕실 민앙사지 수고도가 저상가 쑥 단단벌 예미사 쑥 단단벌 주버디 이물 샤리아치 마도 왕실은 능미도가 왕실은 나한테야 쑥 팔면에 예다바 나한테야디 탄여도 예배 여세들어 봐 탄여도 주세 셔셔지 자 진짜 인도 쑥 동바오스야기 시르님 그 책들라 아니 공부디 쑥 단단벌 동바오스 진짜 들이 자고 왔다 다 동반이 쑥쑥해야 돼 수시 자동면로다 단단벌 동바디 이니 수수샤데 버리스다 두샤도나 자 진리 인도 나차베 다 탄예도 랑제 시베 우마벌이야 바 가수래 그게 꽤 편윤도 전에 아니 다운도 되어야 책들이 최탐제 모니지 동아서 송샤바데 아니 가사주디 한테 진배네 결랑그 루기 우모버 타녀도 랑제 시겐 결랑게 더바다도 샤바 있나 아니 수 동번니기 동미치디 수니 동번이상 사야디 다 멤버처도 수니 동번 말에 수 라왕 그 주땡에 수지 야래 다 진짜 인도 수 동번니기 동사 차버리스 그래서 수 동번니기 동 미시사데 말 멤버처가 야래 수 가사 수 동번니기 동시 수 라왕 그 주대바 뭐 주대바 진짜디 단단바로 먼저 버리slev도 동번니기 동말이스 타녀도 랑세 미시게 되기 다 타녀도 랑세 여 말에서 송야기 다 툭서디 수코라 동버리샤스 수 동번니기 동말이 수코라 동번이랬잖아요 다 송샤 되기 다들 타녀시 뒤송거야. 랑동사가 타녀시 송거야. 디 과도가 쑥 링이 여대버들 토도를 맞으면서 그게 샤제. 디 턴담을 주변 동아리 슬라바 이나. 아니 동시 쑥 라왕 그 주대버 직. 아니 턴담을 주변 각제 동아리 슬라바 이나. 현동소를 관리기도 와. 그래서 달라 때네 쑥 원이지 동아리 쑥 원이지 뭐 주고 쓰잖아요. 랑동가 레고도. 그래서 다 딘지기 가서 우리 벽에 쑥화랑 원이지 뭐 주고 그랬어야 돼. 딱 쑥조로 써고 뒤에 대가랑 최전 대가랑 원이지 뭐 주고 그랬어야니.但了泡云的站呢，哎，米的吸入多，米被带上来的下多，자 드리인도 알아대 가서 워낙 쑥 그게 팔면에 여봐지 만족을 무슨 는 것도 갔다. 쑥 랑면에 여봐 주지 될라가 가를 거래 가지고 무슨 통대 라고 차는 편에서 여대버지 저야도가 통야도 와서 러빈도 뒤트버렸어. 머리배 박작다 머리보다 머리배 다 레벨로 인도잖아요. 대난데 샤르제 마도 등목으로 담바 연은 나와 말이었어. 워낙 숭진 똑바데다 아니 숭진 참아 답은 숭진 도메이네 다 숭진 똑바이네 간다데 아니 쑥 적시게 참아를 봤어. 가서 러브는시 여더 메시아데 세메 미머미가 토네 셰두잖아요. 언디 참아를 봤어. 왜 지던 나오는 시 더리야 내가 죽으러 왔을 때도 로이 숭진 로데기 쑥 랑면에 여바데 랑면에 여바 진비야 말이스 콜러 랑면에 여바 능기야 마도 쑥도 가는 증거스는 쑥룽 쑥식 진바 마도 쑥 랑면에 주버데 나야르데 진기야 말이스 자 근데 이제는 쑥 랑면에 주버 나올 때도 취별로리스 자다 10조 15 채용도와 사말이야 밀로어서야 돼. 그 능술을 밀리게 좀 말했어. 능술을 추려야 했어. 그래도 이내 그 벽에 진단의 유율라 그 산단대로 추려 말했어. 사기 리신 송도가. 와다 드주자리 14호 여와 채용네. 나 진짜 송 고야게 좀 전에 가와 토르스람나. 고물루주기 다시 뒤집어 주주 전도 있는 지나 송야래. 내제 샘단 담발라 녀목 독진 지민중스 미때 하제 여바이나 아니 지 덴진 참무지 디간 레야죠 그래서 사들이 뭐 인도산에 덴진 참무지 레요나 티 장배 차당 참무지 연구래서 저다 루 타녀도 랑전 셰버드 미시베 차네 가사다면 저단에 캬바 중벌래라 녀목 저단에 캬바지 용되게 요래 자, 드리 뭐 인도 다디 동리가 가바디 차단께서 실루쟁에기 덴징기 배 밑에 시다 시고요래서 달래야 그게 가수를 그게 다 간다 로이 밑에 시고요래서 대단해 이 차단 과야기 다 동리 가바데래서 동리 또 과야기 좀전고 대토래서 다 동반이기 뭐 컨디션스럽나 가서 이거 따로 치면 난신 최남기 인루 지신 제배 르 니던고 최전게 최전디 그 군속부터 들루지와 군속부터 최시와 다대 낭섬 대 무슨벌 대 들루 컨디션도 봐 잡아이나 최전고 코랑기 내루스 주메바 이르잖아요. 그 인니야면도 와. 숙소 최전기 인루 최외 르 내몰라 최전 나와 가루도 와. 아니 갈래 고민도잖아요. 아니 인루 수신도 내등에게 로이 콤바야 거롤레 버카도라 최전 나와된 가루요. 자 다디 랑게 치든 양소 영원한 시 아니 다 동원이 등원도 주니 치신 내버는 신지기 에리 치다 도배 자도 삼도 매바다 치기 줘도 매바리서 마삼 죄미 싫어파를 친스다 드림버리 저 드리 인도 동니가 동원이 용어사 되듯이 저바타다 녀와시시 시외인 당상 지금 나와셔야 되죠. 동니기 뭐지 다 동니기 된데 가렸으려나 동반이기 된서야 돼 매매 돼 말이지 동반이 있어야 돼 매매 계저 말이지 동반이기 된데 때베 된리스 때바 매매 다 라왕 그 주베 동에 된리스 자 드리 인도다 땡진 저런 중 때바 지바 인상 때바 매매 라왕 그 주베 동에 자 다들 참 되는 거래 와다 디송기야 자 안데 배가도 개바지근 자셰베 직제죠 직제디 동바 시저 된셰베 동베 되미 댐베데스 죄송합니다 동바 시저어디 된셰베 동베게 좀 말이스 최전기 판륜적인 최전기 디 동베게 좀 말이스 동바 시저 된셰베 동베 되미 댐베데스 땡중 규례 정신기 주면 되미 주면스 다 동바 땡중사 계저디 규 제부 제부 지기야리 디 댐베 제베게 좀 말이스 규 제부 제야디 민상게 깨와지 셔야 마도 달 댐바이나 달레 계도가 셴레 계도가 다 도신 잖아 니고로 터시 강도관의 깨임이 짜베이나 니야미도가 자상가 딘제 인도 깨와서야 돼 민상식이 깨와셔야 마도 민도가 말한서 로라 깨가 내손스르잖아 직프게 링이지 예대버지 판문이지 예대버지 조조서 예대버지 로라 셰그도디 모든 자리에나 니야메데 샤윤도 땡중 귤레 가사 땡중 귤레 정신기 중에 되미 규메슬스 대달 동도 땡중게 자든 레고는 예바나 시직라네 낭동니 민겐도 몇 지급스 다 시지가나 그 전세배 동어지는 대강 땡중 샤신 말봐 그 댐베 동어 있는잖아 댐베 동에 균선 거라 땡는 딱과 인상 댐베 동어です나 윤도 전다 지강도 되거든 그래서 들이 나와도 동반이부터 동바스로는 뮤직체 나와서는 포조되고 뮤직 코 찍버려 봐 저장가 땡이 치르베 인도기야래 랑데 둘도마와 시잘라고 땡이 인도기야래데 이네 좀더 공매 아니 우마벨로기 땡이 모직세 변 숙더부 가져올다 숙더부 찍라 아니 타녀베 모직 단단베 모직 모니니야래스 저장고 타녀도 줍땡에 코라 때베 왕그 줍대베 심바 인도산에 때는 딱 봤삼시 인도산에 마되베 라왕그 줍에 똥한디 레트도가 디 숙낭섬네 때 능말봐 숙 인우를 짜나 셰용으로 봐 저상아 단담 주식을 짜요나 니규 되는지 탄의 주식을 되기 니하면 되는지 탄의 주식을 니해야 돼 군수된 봐 최전티제 난 되게 인우 컨디션도 봐 짜요 뭐 있나 아니 대 때네 딱섬지 마도 모니지 주버지 니규 매대버지 뭐 인도산에 판문이 주버지 매대기 자연데 털도 dom져야 돼. 다 때네 딱섬지 사기 저서 낭도 니부터 가서 우리 그게 코지 딱 무슨 거야 된중 전도 이 말이야 자 디스전에다 안다 옹어버 차다와래서 이게 시하면 누가 저바다다 녀르시에 동니든지 여래 띠 검고야 돼 덴지메 봐서 하던다래 동해메 봐서 하던다래 띠셰국도가 봐 덴지메 동반이 그 동원도 집에 내고 저바다다 녀르시에 니시 나와 직차 되기도 하스 결한 그 되었나시 최전 랑문에 주버지 샤바이는 할람네니 넬루톤 롱을레 최전데 할람 러로 서지 그 영습에 소리도 딱 간다고 아니 동니 된데 아니 땡주고 돼야 마담 tension nube don't get some maris. What is some hurry? Then 가서 타녀돈 줘야지 말한지 용에 가자야지. 저전 좀더 뒤송이래. 네루 달라스 네루라다 네루는 샤베이나 라과야 동바레스 매야 동바레스 네루라 메달라고 니가로 모니 유튜브에 동어리디 뭐서 매나 라고 주는 치벌을 왜 말했어. 그때 타냐도 녀미로 봐. 다티 메신 섹시 메디 따두자는 녀미도. 섹시 라고디 따두자는 녀미도. 뭔지도 또 뭔 유튜브 동아리데 그 잘 저지가 사고도요 뭔 유튜브 동아 인상 저지해야지 연구도 와 뭔 유튜브나 저지도 말아 당 뭐를 두고 한테送了 가서 뭐 마워서야 탄예도 정신 랑전 등에做了呀 가서 개등은 정신에 예벌 제수 따쳐놨어 대단한 뭐고 그 규진매버려 켜 따오시 송도와 개등 뭐고 랑은의 예버지기 뭐니 주어 때바매백관의 주어지기 편한 거 내가 이나 아니 편한 거 균제세에 캐나신 말이다 균제 캐나 뭐 니기 최 대단 뒤제기 최 주어라 규진 샹의 떠도 규진 샹의 라래도 어디서 규진 강을 때바매백 뭐 주어나 뭐 주나 때방겨와래 때바매나 균제기 저와 샤신 말이 그래서 균제기 저와 예배 니기 때바 임버티 샤토도 때바 임버티기 나 때는다고 임버티 샤고도 때는다고 인사 랑문도 주 동아에서 그 샤고도 저상 동번이 수수 쑥 동보스 벽에 근데도 게 벽에 저 라베 독스는 근데 통도 있잖아.
So His Holiness is asking, when I speak in English and do all these gestures with my hands, what do you feel about my Tibetan? So His Holiness is saying that you, the Chinese, are attentively listening as if they really understand him. So in the Heart Sutra we find mention of the form is empty. And so with regard to this, the Madhyamakas who assert some kind of self-existence or essence in even convention, how do they interpret it is that that when they say things do not have any true existence, they say that for example, in the case of form, the form itself must not be touched. In other words, there is something that has to be empty in the form, which makes the form empty. And therefore, they say when they assert that there is some kind of objective existence in the form, that's what they get down to. And therefore, they say that when the Heart Sutra says that form is empty, what this means is that form is empty. Ultimately, form is empty. So they have to qualify this emptiness with ultimate to interpret this this statement in the Heart Sutra, and therefore, accordingly, according to them, when you establish emptiness of form. Having established the emptiness of form, when you see the form itself, they say that when you see a form, when an ordinary person sees a form, the form does not appear to the sensory perception as having as true existence, and so therefore they say that this sight. Visual perception, seeing the form, is unmistaken with respect to how the form appears to the perception. But then, according to the Madhyamaka tradition, the Prasangikas, who do not assert any kind of essence or self-existence in even conventionally, according to them, then they find fault in it, because, for example, in the case of Master Chandrakirti, for him, what the Savatantrika Madhyamakas are saying comes down to the point of saying that that form is actually being emptied by emptiness. Because in order to establish that emptiness of form, the form has to be empty of some kind of ultimate existence, as they qualify it, and therefore, from the point of view of Master Chandrakirti, the Savatantrika Madhyamakas who assert some kind of self-existence in the phenomena, conventionally, for them, they would have to say that, according to Chandrakirti, they would have to say that form is that what is said in the sutra earlier quoted, where it says the form is form does not make the emptiness. No, emptiness does not make the form empty, but because form itself is empty. So, with respect to this quotation from the Ratnakuta Sutra, or the 25,000 verses of Panchaparamita, from the point of view of Chandrakirti, the Savatantrika Madhyamakas would have to say that they are tending to say that the form itself is not empty. And therefore, the Prasangikas, according to Prasangikas, the form itself is empty. They do not have to say that what is said in the Heart Sutra is rather interpretable as such, but they can take it rather literally, that what it means is that form itself is empty, which means that the form is empty of its own self-existence. And so this difference can be termed as the difference between the Prasangika saying that form itself is empty, has to do with that of the emptiness of the rangtong, or emptiness of intrinsic emptiness, and then the other school is saying that form is empty, inherent of ultimate existence. The form itself is not empty as such. They tend to assert that of the Shentong view. So when you establish emptiness, what you have to be able to do is that of destroying any and all kinds of objectification of things. So you have to be able to completely deconstruct whatever you are analyzing, and the form and so forth. Because if even a slightest kind of objectification of things and phenomena and events is left within you, then there is always going to be this clinging onto self-existence, the true existence, and that will create more problems constantly. And so when you establish emptiness, you have to be able to dissolve everything, and do not so that you do not cling to anything as having some objective nature, objective existence. But then the other schools asked Madhyamakas that form and so forth have to have true self-existence, because this is how they appear to us, isn't it? They say. We can touch them, we can feel them, we can see them, and so forth. And therefore, mustn't they have some self-existence? And the Prasangika Madhyamaka response to this is that appearance of self-existence of things is illusion, that is mistaken, erroneous. And so, again, the other schools say that things are established by some valid cognition. Whether something is existent or not has to be established on the basis of whether there is a valid cognition that sees it or not, isn't it? And therefore, how can it be that the things do not exist the way they appear to us? the Madhyamaka, the Prasankhika response to this is that although things do appear to us as if they have some kind of existence from themselves, from their side, as if they have some existence in and of themselves, but that's not the way things are. The appearance is mistaken. And we have this mistaken, the way they appear to us is through mistaken perception. And although that is the case, we can still posit, we can still establish the existence of a form. Because when you see a form, although it does appear as if it has some kind of existence from its own side, but apart from that, the form itself, the form as such, which has its own function of having some kind of a physicality, is actually there. And so that is not what we are denying, but therefore the perception which sees, the visual perception which sees the form is a valid cognition in respect to that object, which is the form. In other words, the object of apprehension, the form, does exist. So these kind of subtle distinctions have to be understood. It's very important for to understand this. The form, the way the form appears to us is a mistaken way of seeing it, and we have a mistaken way of seeing the form. But still, the form itself, with respect to the object of apprehension, the form itself, the perception is correct, unmistaken. Nagarjuna says in the 60 stanzas of reasoning that so long as there is the mind has some kind of a nazzling, and the mind in a way, so long as it nazzles in true existence. To that extent, how can the poisonous, destructive emotions not arise in us? And so we have to be able to destroy any and all kinds of objectification of things, down to the subtlest objectification of things. When you realize, in establishing emptiness, in order to be able to see emptiness fully, you have to be able to destroy any objectification of any object, anything, events, and phenomena. And therefore, that is the purpose of that of emptiness. So, with regard to the purpose of emptiness, it is to destroy any kind of objectification of true existence and things, which is, in other words, the basis or the foundation of our desire, attachment, and aversion. And so that is the purpose, to destroy any objectification of things, the purpose of emptiness. And then with regard to the identity or the nature of emptiness, what happens to us is that we do not stay with the appearance of things, the objects, as having in the conventional sense. So things do exist in the conventional sense, but then without being satisfied with the conventional existence, sometimes people tend to go too far to check whether the form is existing this way or that way, and so forth. How when you check into how things actually exist, that is analysis into the true nature of things. And therefore, when you do that kind of analysis, what happens is all the objects that you analyze are kind of disappear from that vision, from that perception. And so the purpose or the nature of emptiness is such that things are that things do not have any intrinsic nature. And so then emptiness itself is something which is beyond expression, beyond conception, as it says. When you realize emptiness, what happens is there is a total kind of vacuity that happens to you, and so that emptiness has to be understood in terms of the dependent arising of things. The dependent, because things are empty, we can say there is dependent origination, that things can happen, that causes can give rise to effects and so forth, and the functionality of things can exist. And therefore, that is the meaning of emptiness, or the meaning of emptiness is such that that there is no nothing. First of all, the meaning of emptiness is that things are dependent, which means that there is nothing which is not that can exist on its own accord without depending on others. One of the Tibetan scholars also has said that emptiness does not mean that things being empty of any function, any things not being able to give rise to its effects and so forth, but that it has to be that of dependent arising. And things do not, because things do not arise from some kind of intrinsic causes, therefore they are like illusion. And so arisal of things, effects arise not inherently, but because they have causes and conditions, the effects arise. And so that very fact of the causes giving rise to effect is merely nominal. That has to be understood. Because if things arise, the effects arise truly, inherently from the causes, then it has to be found when you analyze using the four different alternatives to find whether it arises from self, others, or self, or another, or both, or causeless. You have to be able to find that the effects arise from one of these alternatives, whereas this is not the case. So the things have their own existence, and things do have their appearance, and we have to be able to see that when you say things are empty, for example, form is empty of self inherent nature, or form is empty of true existence, what that means is that it arises in dependence on others. It occurs in dependence on others, and therefore appearance and the emptiness have to be able to you have to be able to make these two complementary with each other. When you say something is empty, it has to be give this insight into things being dependent. And when you say there is the appearance that there is dependence of things, you have to be able to see that there is that it's empty. And so these two truths with respect to one object, for example, the form, in the case of the lower schools such as Vaibhashika and so forth, what they say is that the two truths are separate. Like their way of establishing two truths are such that the conventional and ultimate truth are different things. Whereas for the Madhyamakas, everything, all phenomena is empty, and therefore each and every phenomena has both the truths in them. So conventionally, things do arise in dependence on other factors. Things do exist in dependence on other factors, which shows that they are empty of any independent existence. So the two truths are established in such a way that that which is found by the cognition, which only analyzes in a conventional way, is called a conventional truth, and that which is found by analytical mind, which looks for the ultimate nature of things, is that of the ultimate truth. So, in other words, what all these things bring us down to is that everything is dependent origination. That saying that things do not have any true existence means that everything is dependent. So the purpose of emptiness is to destroy all clinging to true existence, and then the nature of emptiness is that it is without any elaboration and any and all kinds of elaboration called mental constructions, and then. The meaning of emptiness is that everything is dependent.
She Taiwanese said she Googlist. That's something they, you know, she council with some of the Taiwanese and soon yaris. Canada Tampa Tini, you name number Mishi, but that's not yet Taiwan and Summit in a Mishi. Did you the Carson, Tanya Lana Matin, but Tambeton the Dominus? Chenny, Tandam Tamba, Tongwanese Deati, then a tag with turn into. 그 최전기 주당고 때에다가 인상 때문에 라왕의 주변에 동시에도 와. 자상가 동반이 가게 요마를 쓰는 시대하지만 이나 아니 단열 된 거 같습니다. 동반이 사대 정신 주변에 동시에 인도산에 그 단열의 주주들 간에 주부도 와. 저들이 인도 단열라는 마된 말 담배되는 동민주스 뒤송해. 담배되는 마도원 양년대법 통민주스. 다 대단하야 동반일로 따니는 시로충노 풍어지 지들 주로 송니에다 링안 예버 주버신 전에 다 동반이 따왔어야 돼 그게 다 남주기 잡아 시부전에 시과지 레마도 라라보시는 거 시야명에 지금 양은 그게 각자 까차나 셔더를 줘야 각자 마켓에서 하나 땅들을 통대야. 그거 되게 저기요. 저들이 이번 인도산에 시로 충노 풍원주스. 근데 인도 지시 선배圈이 등도가와 tenju는 특별투는 최대의 로도 로버 교원인스. 점된 대기 다 뒤제 감도 몇 나서 요래. 지 점된 대기 뒤제 인쇄로기 동이 다 차시 차와 시트하고 다 가고래. 근데 이번 인도산에 뒤제 감도 몇바트 잡아 지금 점된 대기 송해야 했어. 다 뒤송해. 견도 타. 다지네 견도 타완 요원이 동로 타바 메인베스 춘이 동리 봉제바 간등하라 밑에도스. 다 타녀도 랑선 되겐기 아니 정신 여벌 마와 남기 다 정신 매바 마와도 수 공도 견주셔버디디 정루기 때네 딱섬시기 타녀기 때네 딱섬시기 다 가소래 타녀 샤네 때네 딱섬 인상 모니 주변 동아리 전에 송셔버 되기 아니 그래 추 뭐뭐 다 정신 여벌 마와도 추 너시 팡셔버디디 나는 내가 속 말했어. 내가 이게 편한 속 그랬어. 가래서나 편한 뭐 주고 시작을 봤어. 그래서 뭐 주도 전에 시간을 라려봐 말 봐. 시간을 라려면서 애니 규진이 저와식 말 봤어. 패닉 저 용식 말 봤어. 어디 됐습니까? 배는 거 아니죠. 무슨 냠용코라 배는 시버직 개월이야. 미긴고기, 다긴고기, 원부 시버를 차셔버리나. 다긴 원부, 미기 원부 배는 순수 미시다고 차셔나. 애니 미긴 속 대만타긴 애니 이lun가마 디디샤니 도스니 시에요아레 그 순지 미시 Rawang going to Truguyana, Taba going to Truguyana, Genji Ralik Marwa. Most Yonko Kadrang to her. And I'm going to Tanyalia, Chashi Lesson Yari, Chashi Lesson said, Pachanga Chimbayina, Chawa said, Kawado. Chawa the Mandra Chibabu Yumari, Chawa Le Yumari. So Chawa said the Chibaboda, Chawa Le Jose, go Shiruk Chadiari. Ine Chibabana Chawayamari, Chawa Le Men Chawayumari. So that he depends on doing to Shavaji. Then a thousand with Shabayina, did Shatukura. Then a thousand Maimba, no to Shabayina, the Shakautua. Gunja would get Sidadi. Pan Dakja, Pan Dokchis. That Nerja, Nerji. That Munguchi, Kandati, Tanya Daxam Ganishana, somewhat Doji Shatu. The Tanya Daxam Maimbo could turn you money, do a Shagachamina, Matesh, Kawashagachine, Jomotochi, young Yondigo. What's a delay into go to disorder? Kaza. Going to Taiwan, you and don't have a main base. That regime don't say, Dinjung don't. Then that way in the regime don't say that don't what this one we are. Turning Tony Ponche, Kandanga Miteto. Down Dorduna, Kano don't want you, tell them just wrong. Kano Tony Miro, tell them just room in you. Turn the Rangi Journal in Ala Yonsu, Jujeva, Dalai Lama Buddhist to Tony Jeva, Juvation. What a day, taking a Atisha. Getting on the Ranshile, you ever just Tajana, Tadayana, Moban, Gujima, Churtaos, Tapa, Don, Suntua. Dan Dributani, Dunida, Chevaboda, Cheda, Cha, Gawatan, and Gawatan, Dribulayan, never chase. Now, Dudon, that turned out that Dudon Dribu, Jawa, Chevaboda, Chawada, Kasu, Chave Yuda, Chitty Shatumaris, Dagan Shingi. Gijigi do Gijan Dribu Saduzadi and Gijigi do Dribu Gilu country, Jagachabaina, Dodges and Maintenance that Linguari, Dali Jawami, Shani Jawami, Nigari Jawami, Humility Jawami, Linguri, Gijan Dribu Tawaina, and Dribu Pena Judan, Dribu Nigalo, some Tabaine, Chick that had a counter to some Tabaina. And the Yamating, eh? Gajan Dribumene, Yabashi Jabber, Mabash Jabber to the Jabayina, you make your Tinzik and Javina, and you meeting, eh? The child Mudua. So the name you Sane, Shababoda, Chedacha, Gawatan and Kawatan, Dribula, and never che. That one not wrong. Yet did you love that?
So, with regard to how things are established as conventionally, it is something that we can tell from our own experience. The Dom Temple has said that, of course, from the point of view of how things actually exist, the way things actually exist, not neither the hand nor the fire can be found to have any self-existence. But then, having said that, if you were to put your hand in the fire, of course, it will naturally burn your hand. And so this shows that although the fire and the hands are both do not have any kind of intrinsic essence or nature in themselves, but then they do have their own functions. That the fire has the function of burning your hand is something which is conventionally established. And so similarly, Master Nagarjuna also says, if you view existence of things in terms of intrinsic nature, you are then viewing things as having no causes and conditions, which is the verse number 16 in this chapter. And so So whatever is, if things do have some kind of essence, some kind of true essence in themselves, then they cannot be dependent on causes and conditions, which means that they are not dependent on other factors. But then we can see that the effects depend on causes and conditions, which is very obvious, and therefore effects are dependent, and therefore they can be designated and in relation to or in dependence upon other factors, and therefore this shows that they do not have any existence from their own side. And then the verse number 8 basically shows that the Buddha's teachings are based on the two truths, and the worldly conventional truth of worldly conventions and the ultimate truth. And so the Buddha's purpose of teaching the ultimate truth and is to show that things are dependent, and therefore the conventional truth also exists. And this is what we have to understand, that things do have their own existence conventionally, but then if you check into their true nature, the final nature of things, then they are ultimately they are empty of any independent existence. And that lack of independent existence is the ultimate truth, and then that of the thing onto which you establish the emptiness of it is the conventional. That thing that it's dependently arisen, and it's the convention. And then Zon has read the verse number 9 and 10. So without a basis of convention truth, a truth of ultimate cannot be taught. The truth of ultimate cannot be taught. Because there is the ultimate truth, we can say that things are designated in dependence on other factors, and therefore they are empty of any intrinsic nature. And when you say that they are empty of intrinsic nature, what that actually shows is that they are conventionally existent. And then verse number 11. When you check into the nature of emptiness of things, what you have to do is you have to use your intelligence, which critically analyzes the nature of things correctly and precisely. Because if what happens is if you negate too much, then you will fall into that of nihilism. Whereas if you negate too little, then you will fall into that of the eternalism, the view of eternalism. So by viewing, that is the meaning of this verse, which is, by viewing emptiness wrongly, a person of little intelligence is destroyed, like a snake incorrectly seized or a spell incorrectly cast. And therefore, the verse number 12 says, thus knowing that it is difficult to penetrate the depth of this teaching, the Buddha's thought turned away from the teaching of this Dharma. And of course, this also shows that the Buddha is someone who knew each and every mental disposition, the natural interest, and of the different sentient beings, and therefore whatever he has taught were taught in accordance with these the different capacities of the different sentient beings. So that is the quality of the Buddhas. And then verse number 13 is an objection to those who assert some kind of self-existence in conventionally, where Nagarjuna says, you have raised these fallacious objections. Since they are not relevant to emptiness, your objections from abandonment of emptiness do not apply to me. Because Nagarjuna says that things are merely posited or established independence on others, designated on others. Things are merely designated independence on others, and therefore the other schools say that if that is the case, then things do not have any kind of self-existence from their own side. And Nagarjuna is saying that if there were some kind of true existence from their own side, then what that would mean is that things are not dependent on other factors. Whereas you can see that if things are not dependent on other factors, then effects cannot arise from the causes. Causes will not have any function to give rise to their effects, in other words, and therefore the effects would be independent, which is rather not tenable.
That's all she would bet. Nimble that did it. They have a lot of draws show it. Nimmer did also as my lotion, Yaware. That's in you with the Kareslona. Tension the one you want, tenant on when you share. Tenant, that was the tiny umelamino. Jenny. That don't when you say, Umabe, that Ranshi Meba Maveta, but the Umabe, don't when you soon the other turned that day. Tenant that was cigarettes. Tension the one you want cigarette. Tension the one you want to turn that day. Tenant that was cigarettes. That's all. That there are. 나보사제에 두더마와 시잘로가 송대하기 지 제법보 런니에 되네 줘 풍부를 되네다고 그래 스르자네 된지가 정신 다 가서 저기 다 된다고 소문다 간다 제법보에 간다 다 되네 줘 제체 제법의 롱제제 풍속 쉬디에 교대 깨는 되는 중에 사게 된중데 다 나와 용서를 얻어야 되지. 다 우마베 제부 줄을 떠야 돼. 나sam으로 통되기도 와. 배지 튼주의 강점 신그리. 다도 샤오 상담이나 제부 줄을 떠야 정도 마세베 주든 제부선이 샤야기 뭐부 강실을 규 타냐 넣어야 돼. 규 타냐 넣어야 돼. 줄야 돼. 제불을 떠도 가. 규디 제불을 깨봐 말이 돼. 줄은 줘야 돼. 줄야 돼. 제불을 떠도 가. 그래서 제불왕의 규차도 가. 줄 제불을 깨봐다 말이 돼. 이네 줄 줘야 돼. 제불 떠기. 제불 왕기. 이게 되지. 저상가 제부 계시 주로 떠봐서도 마세베 계시도 줘야 돼. 계시를 떠도 갔어. 다들 준제 계시 말다. 딱배 계시도 가. 제부 주로 떼는 중. 준제 계시지. 주딘 제부를 떼냈다. 다 땡지 권위를 소한테. 자, 다 떼냈다고 왔을 때 다 자식 없이 차. 그래서 뭐 쉬위마. 차셔를 떼냈다고 왔어. 딱 간다 안 듣건데 떼냈다고 써야 고 터도디 최 간다 가인이 뒤 뭐디 난좀 될샤는 집이다. 그 딘좀 나한테 요래. 지금도 다 난좀 된대 지금 안에 딱 그렇게 가서 그래. 가다 가서 그래. 그게 최시대 여대버지. 단디 뭐자가 침배이나. 다들 민더 턴스 민죽세 턴시 열었다. 민죽세 턴시 열에디 민쌈 다쌈스는 쌈저디 가르쳐버렸으나 민죽세 턴 매박게 말했어. 민죽세 턴 열했어. 다 턴데 세매에 주열했어. 레디네 쌈세가 쌈저디 민죽세 턴디 턴 코랑 그 뭐네 주여면 제가 침배이나 죽죽세요 말했어. 니야요 말했어. 그래서 딘데 인도 팬은 지기가 있는데 얘는 열에 다 유로도 거래했으나 민기 왕게 여버렸어. 간다 민다 떡배 따네 작바쌈 작바쌈 되나 탄예배 참아신지 민어봐 대소도 마세베 견담주의식 리시지 민어봐 대쌈시기 때문에 여번 줘야 마도 된징은에 여번 줘야지 샤임도 된징은에 샤임도 된 매번 말봐 된 여러 그래서 된징 모두 가르스나 때에 딱sam도 가다 덕지기 떡배 딱sam도 가明的 딱섬, 明的 시작섬, 사지가 된도. 그래서 와다 때는 딱 배ton다 터도다 들이 明的 시작섬 써야 돼. 도지가 떡배 딱섬. 자상가 최초다 뒤 뭐 주발라 도지가 떡발라 라래도 가. 지상 샹라 라래도 가. 도지가 떡발디 다제 최대 말봐. 그래서 다제 최대 샹도 주도 알아. 진짜 샹지도 왕 주어. 자상가 샹왕 주보마도 랑왕 주면도 가. 자 때부터 믿어서 된 개화를 개하는 뭔가를 봐. 다 때는 땅은 때버. 때버 인도 마대버 영식 말 봐. 어다 진짜 인도 되는 때는 따고 때스. 때는 딱스럽도 때는 스럽도 때버시. 라왕게 매버시. 때는 요리스 따버시. 자 매번 말이스. 진짜 인도 라왕게 여바이 말이 매바이 말이 다 우마. 딱배 rāngmēn mēbā yīnzāng xiān lā tēni yuedabā tī yīndu tāngdāyā sē tāqbā tātiyā sē tēni tāqdū yuedabā tāqbā guāne chāwāchī yuedabā shīmbā yīdu zāne chādāyā sē tīndi yīndu tīni umē lām yīnōs tā tī gyumzēn tā tīndi yīndu kāngshī tīnchūng mā yīmbā chāngā yabā mā yīmbā tīchī tōngbā mā yīmbā chāngā yabā mā yīnōs tā dūjē kī chūyā sōng tō mā sē 시절 다 시제디 참으로 때는 따고 멋이 인도잖아요. 뉴제가 쳐디디 때는 좀 대서도 와서 뉴제가 쳐디디에 그 정신기 그 모샤가치는 때는 딱sam마도 매대해. 단 뉴메지가 쳐디디에 때는 딱sam마도 매대와. 근데 인도 쳐 타다 아니 때는 따고 때는 좀 인도잖아요. 아니 정신이 또 뭐인 비 쳐제야 말이지. 또 쇼로가 니부터 쉬우지까지 버려셔.
So the next two verses are very important, and you must recite it every day and try to understand the meaning on a daily basis. This shows the essence of the whole text of Nagarjuna. When the Madhyamikas say that things arise in dependence on others, what that means is that things are designated by dependence. So in dependence on other factors, that things are designated, merely designated. And that is the way things exist. And of course, within the Buddhist, all the four schools of Buddhism, schools of thought within Buddhism, do assert some sort of designation through dependence. For example, all the schools say that a person is designated on the basis of the aggregates, and therefore they say that the doer of the actions, the person, is called dependent on others, and also the aggregates, the psychophysical aggregates on the basis of which you designate a person, they are also dependent on other factors. So this is something which all the different four different schools of Buddhism assert equally. Whereas the difference, the distinction of Madhyamakas is, especially that the Prasangikas, is that it's not only the case that the effects, when you have an effect, that effect is arise in dependence on other factors. This is something on dependence on its causes and conditions. Of course, effects arising from causes and conditions is something even perhaps the animals are aware of. But the unique explanation or understanding of the Madhyamakas is that it's not only the case that the effects arise from causes and conditions, which means that effects are dependent on their causes and conditions. They say that for the cause to become a cause of an effect, it has to be understood in relation to the effect. Although the cause is not brought about by the effect itself, by its effect itself, but then the fact that something becomes a cause is because of or through the power of the effect itself. And so in this way, the Madhyamikas are able to say that the effects are, on the one hand, the effects are dependent on their causes, but on the other hand, even the causes themselves are dependent on their effects. And that's how the cause is established. And so you can see here two different kinds of understandings of how things, the insight or understanding of the two different ways of understanding of the dependent origination that effects arise from in relation to or in connection, in dependence on their causes, and the causes are established in relation to or in dependence on their effects. And so Madhyamikas say that the things are merely established by name. But then, and so what that shows is that when you use certain labels, certain names, or some designations, it shows that there is something that you apply this to, an object that you apply it to. But then when the Madhyamikas say that things are merely nominal, merely a name, what does that the term mere actually negate is not that it does not mean, when you say things are merely nominal or merely a name, it does not mean that there is something there which is just a name and nothing actually there which is functioning. Of course, causes and conditions giving rise to their effects do exist, therefore the effects do exist, and everything that is in the world do exist, and we have also the valid cognition of those things. The objects that we see here and so forth, there is a valid cognition which establishes them, and therefore there is something, an object. But then by the term mere, what it negates is that if you try to search for the thing, like a vase or something, in that object, you cannot actually find anything that you can point to as being that object when you search for it. And therefore, since things do exist, but then when you search for them in themselves, then there is nothing that you can find. And therefore, although the effects of things, the influence on us and so forth do exist, but then the way they exist is by way of imputation. And therefore, the imputation by that of the names, language, and our conceptions, merely by way of imputation or through our conceptions and language, things do have their existence. And therefore, the conventionality of things is established on the basis of three criteria. One is that things are the things are renowned in the worldly conventions, and that these renowned worldly conventions are not invalidated by other worldly conventions, valid cognitions. And then the third is that even the ultimate analysis of things do not invalidate them. So someone is saying that tomorrow is going to give the Avalokiteshvara initiation, and there is a part where you have to meditate on emptiness during the initiation. So you have to be able to recite these two verses, which are verse number 18 and 19.
And could lolly and jotted is an could chasu tail la chotua. It's not saying to tick jacha.
So make sure that you have these two verses number 18 and 19 in your memory, that you can recite it by, from your memory tomorrow, someone is saying. And it's important to have the words in one's mind, in memory, because that when we try to understand something, especially the Dharma, we have to rely on words. And through the words, we can actually get hold of the meanings of the Dharma. Just as the analogy of a walking stick is needed for an old person to walk. So the words are like this, the walking stick, and then the meanings are like that of the an old person.
Kebe Wongore, Dunida, then the Doyore. Some of you during and the Sastation that you constant shiveri. Chennai or Kongan, you Zashu Chibicudulia, Yan Zashu Simjudua. The none of the mix it. She does a girl Zashu Simjuna, Kongi Gengi Chasu Dirisha, Yan Zashu, Machikona, Zashu Simju, in Machinando.
There was a great master named Gen Nyima Rinpoche, Gen Nyima Gelsen, who was a really excellent scholar and practitioner, and there was no doubt, perhaps, that he had also realized emptiness. And when I received the teaching on these fundamental stanzas of the middle way called wisdom from him, usually according to his own teacher's tradition, he was the students had to memorize the text, this fundamental wisdom. But in my case, he gave me exception. And then verse number 20 is saying that the objections that were made by the lower schools to the Madhyamakas is being returned to them, because it is, if things are not dependent, then they would have to be independently existent. And therefore, these faults would fall on them. So His Holiness is just going to read the rest of the text, and you may also follow. Just read through the text, verse number 20 downwards. If all of this is not empty, neither origination nor disintegration, then it follows for you that the Four Noble Truths do not exist. If things are not dependent on origination, how does suffering come to be? Suffering has been thought to be impermanent, so how can it exist from its intrinsic nature? And verse number 22. Verse number 23. Verse number 24. Verse number 25. Verse number 26. Verse number 27. Verse number 28. Verse number 29. Verse number 30.
파괴 되나 매배치 담배 초기 예만 쳐도 긴도 예면은 산제지도 예반요 교지 산제 정주라 마대바야 태워 교지 정주 산제라 마대바야 태워 교지 정신 이지 산제 정주 죄了 정주 자양 정주团면요 가양 쳐도 최면바 남양 쳐버 민주대 민동원 지시자 정신란의 차원에 쳐도 취미 매버양 저부처럼 예반요 쳐도 취미 규중에 저부처럼 예만이 쳐도 취미 규중에 저부캐디 켜라요
Verse number 34. Verse number 35. Verse number 36. Verse number 37. Verse number 38.
동네 탈질 내다니 묘모 탐지 뽕체
Verse number 40.
강기 땡진 대번 중 통화 대니사 동리기 된 통화의 동리기 된 시신 다 또고 될라 아니 귤리게베 동네 사야여 아니 동네 사야게 탑여 디리 시용 그래 통화 대니 동네다 근주다는 거보다 람니트다 통이 파괴되었다 보시죠. 저도 지금 이슈 쓰시고 써도 좋습니다.
So verse number 40 summarizes the whole chapter, saying that someone who has understood and realized emptiness would be able to put an end to suffering, its origin, cessation, and the path. And would be able to understand all these four truths. Next, we're going to go through Lama Tsongkhapa's Praise of Dependent Origination.
가서 그게 꾸준히 그도네 동력이 따와려야 쉬우 통나 전부 쉬우죠. 레디네 릭셔 센진 제베 겁다. 다 프로징 제바 릭셔 센진 제베 그도다. 즉 다가는 신기 냥아 다 년종 다동의 도시 그래서 그도라 동력이 따와 송단데 말하죠. 다한테네마 지금지 차제를 펴니 차례를 초사 집중 숙청 시분나 난 대대 처지 루루 약세의 슝디디 바 균도 시체 시부 즉 잡아난체 아니 눕지 다 찬남다 지다 냠다 찬남 제마를 지리야 개세 루루 약세 성공하스 사무된 중단 그 조안제 대인안에 반대상계장 야비치노 파괴 공부 총 반달라메쇼로 소한데 소원난 신기 에노 모블루주 에네 아리안데와 에네 부다폴리다 산계장로 산계장 오늘 나와 잡아 다 찍디 거시기 렌덴송기 야 거시기 패지 루장송도 딱 그디스 타수 미신 제가 왔다 간다 약세 성공하고디 띵중 담려야 졸링 제셔지 차람 중앙에 디나네 반대 산계장 그 코랑의 차베 실 자셔고 잡아 부터벌리도 해야지 남체 정식 울리마도 샤베 샤니 친구나에 차람 중앙에 디니무디 야 부터벌리도 마스는 균이 시기어라다 부터벌리도 마스니 라지 접게베 가서 찍지가 한다 개디 풍부 다이는 깨르지고 저도요 개디 풍부 날래신 풍부선이 매버주스 당연히 이거 뭐 있는 되게 이거 가르쳐줘야 측디 부터벌리든 제베크도데 애니 딘주고 대코나니 지치면 토를 충분다 정도 상원 쳐지 자 저는 그런 게 람준나리야 넘시 렌저면 벌 직접도 땡지 밀루 통화 잠니네 니시 유진 전당 끈지나 테스트하자고 써발라 센다 송샤디 다 디니문디 좀 토리야 애니 배팅 땡중 동벌샤 동벌 땡중을 샤야게 다 그래서 동力따와 타르토가 되는 토를 충분해 대충네 에노 대마타도 대바든 자야 대마트 공부려야 땡중송한테 믹스가 다 대바 충네 당 뭐살 때니 엔 대바든 자야
So with regard to Tsongkhapa, right from his childhood, from his very young age, he had great interest and enthusiasm about the view of emptiness. But then, after having done his studies and written certain texts, such as the explanation of Abhisamaya Alamkara, which is called the Golden Rosary, and also in a poetical text, which is recounting the story of Sadaprarudita, the Bodhisattva, the always crying Bodhisattva, which is a poetical text written by Lama Tsongkhapa. In these two texts, when he wrote about the view of emptiness, which these are slightly different from his later understanding of emptiness. Which indicates that his, in a way, understanding of emptiness has not yet been complete. But then, after having studied all the classical texts and completed his studies, then he went on to live in solitary retreat with. And Lama Tsongkhapa also had great visions of many different personal meditational deities. So he went on to meditate.
Lama Shandachi, Sunju Nanche. Sunju Nabe Kudude, Sunju Nayagi, Kasuri Pigi, Chogor Digi, Loju Chazanlo, Rumjukran, Sijus and Sungi. Did it in Sang Adua? Rubish Zangana, Lojo Jeshu, Bola Bolari, Jingajin, Koran Kosator Jada. So
also there was this one Lama, a Tibetan Lama I knew, who lived in prison, in Chinese prison gulags for 18 years, and then after his prison term, he was released, and then he came to Nepal, where he gave a teaching to another Lama, and during one of the teaching that he was giving to this other Lama, he told me himself that he had visions of all the lineage Lamas of that particular teaching. And so there was no point for him to lie to me, because he was not going to gain anything by lying to me. And he was an old man, and who had lived, who was imprisoned for 18 years, and so had suffered enough. And for these kind of things, mystical things, still happens even today. And so. Lama Tsongkhapa, having gone into solitary retreat or into the mountain hermitages with his 8 chief disciples, one night it is said in his biography that one night he had a dream of 5 masters, Master Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Buddha Palita, and Chandrakirti, and then some say that it was the 5th one was Bhava Viveka, or but others say that it was Nagabodhi. So whichever the case may be, there were 5 different masters doing kind of a discussing about the Dharma and about emptiness. And so during that dream, Lama Tsongkhapa had this, what he dreamt was Buddha Palita holding a text and touching it on his head, Lama Tsongkhapa's head. And then after that, that morning, after what happened was he read the text Buddha Palita commentary on the fundamental stanzas of the middle way. And then while he was reading the text, he came to this point of saying, which reads in the chapter 18, if self-word aggregates, it would have arising and disintegration. If it were different from the aggregates, it would not have the characteristics of the aggregates. If the self itself does not exist, how can there be mine, and so forth. So as he was reading the commentary by Buddha Palita, in this commentary, he gained this insight into emptiness precisely and without any error. And therefore, at that point, he was said to have written this text in Praise of Dependent Origination, remembering the kindness of the Buddha. And
Concise Stages song can't double on them. Gawatenji there was sushi of talent do. That's a tango digging. Java drops lavina. Dumba concise, right? That give concise. Any Chamberlana Mevada, the Chamberlana Meva Droyagi, Junzen, Sodi, Denjung Tekonani Rishas. Denjung Tekonani. 치신 시그버디 시그베찬에 캠발라나 봐. 랑 시그는 시 뒤절이야. 치지 말고 담배찬에 담발라나 봐. 차리. 무슨 거야?
And so the first verse of this text reads, he who speaks on the basis of seeing this makes him a knower and teacher unexcelled. So what this basically shows is how does someone become an unexcelled knower, and how does someone becomes an unexcelled teacher. And so a person becomes an unexcelled knower, or someone who understands things precisely by seeing the dependent origination of things as precisely as they are. And just as he has seen it, when he teaches it precisely to his disciples, he becomes an unexcelled teacher. And then this next verse, the verse number 2, actually is showing the meaning of the that of chapter 26 of the Fundamental Stanzas of the Middle Way.
대설로다 대바 이 땡지 대바 중 추기 되면은 지들 공도 취미요. 대단한 거니로 대백권도 수식이 땡는 중 송을 원서지고 지신이 강강깨를 하려고 대들은 신기도 송은 딜레 야선의 랭도순이 지시요. 좀 된다는 건 돌려야 되죠래. 강시 깨를 개바 대마기. 대라 깨외는 신 예만이. 깨는 라래 칸데 똥벌셔 사지. 어디네 인도산에 동리 주식이 균제배 터도 샤인도산에 균제기 다 가서 우리 그게 규단 제부께야 제부줄을 알아봐 균 제부를 때봐 다 디디간에 랭도와 어디 소리 사진이 인도 강가 깨를 알아봐 대들은 시키도시 수원 딜레 연습의 랭도순이 지식이었어.
And then verse number 5 says that whatever is depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence. What excellent instruction can there be more amazing than this proclamation? So what this shows is that the meaning of sutra, where it says what arises in dependence on conditions has no birth. It has no nature of birth as such, because what arises in dependence on conditions is said to be empty, and one who understands empty is said to be conscientious. And so And this shows that the effects arise from independent on causes and conditions, and therefore the effects are empty of any intrinsic existence. Verse number 10.
Debu chawa chigi yore, so chawa chingi ngor yores. Tendin drudi yores chene. The gyundregi, tenjung gyuzidu chedi, rangshingi drudi sin shegare. Tende tela, rangshingi meti, tenne dagwa chislona, gejab chayingo, gyata chayingo yore. Chaswa, gyawatane modruwas, disungsha. Tawandi yu chidru kontu shubu nus. Kyorangi lu kareslona, kyunye namshi tongbo ni tenju tundu tongwa rangshingi tongbo da chaji taiba mingi shingsi. Tele tongbo tongwa tongla chawa miru chada chawa tongwa nyangwa yangdu tongwa yurus.
And then verse number 10 says, this way of dependent origination, those who perceive it as contradictory or as unestablished, how can they comprehend your system? So with regard to this verse, those who assert that in the case of the non-Buddhist traditions, because they assert some kind of a permanent self, a soul and so forth, therefore they do not assert that things arise in dependence on others. They do not assert dependent origination as such. And whereas dependent origination is the primary, the chief, the most important reasoning to prove that things are empty of intrinsic existence, the non-Buddhists do not assert that. And therefore, when you try to use this reasoning to the non-Buddhist, the reasoning is said to be unestablished. Whereas for the even within the Buddhist philosophical tradition, there are those who say that because causes can give rise to their effects, and because effects also have their own nature, therefore causes and their effects, causes and conditions and the effects have their own self-nature as such, and therefore they try to use that the dependent arising, reason of dependent origination to prove that things have their self-nature, some kind of intrinsic nature, and therefore for them this kind of reasoning is contradictory.
So
and verse number 15 is finished.
Yeah.